some people think climate change is a hoax. It ain't a hoax. I think the last 10 years have been the warmest on record. And we can create millions of good-paying jobs, transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency, to solar, to wind, and other sustainable energies.
I think the climate change issue is very complicated. And I think, did you see the Washington Post piece that they wrote where they did this long-term view? First of all, the reality is that the Earth's temperature has never been static, right? We could both agree on that. It's always been up and down. There's been ice ages and heat waves. And then the Washington Post looked at it. What was the time period that they looked at? That essentially they found that we're in a cooling period. That the Earth over the past X amount of years, and this was like a very inconvenient discovery, but they had to report the data, and kudos to them for doing that.
So that's podcaster Joe Rogan interviewing Senator Bernie Sanders. Professor Michael Mann, can you respond? He says, talking about this cooling period.
Yeah, they say a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. And here, he probably read a headline, this Washington Post headline, and didn't even understand the headline, let alone actually read the article. It was about a research article that had been published, I believe, in the journal Nature, which I reviewed at the time and wrote about it. And he got it 180 degrees wrong. What that article actually showed was when you look back over tens of millions of years. And I talk about, the lessons from Earth history and what we can learn from them in our fragile moment. And this is related to this article. They're looking at the changes in climate that have taken place over millions of years and using a climate model to figure out what it tells us about how sensitive the climate is to increases in CO2. Now, in the past, on hundreds of millions of year timescales, those changes in carbon dioxide are driven by very long-term changes in explosive volcanic activity, which puts carbon dioxide into the atmosphere on timescales of tens of millions of years. I mean, what it shows is that the climate may actually be more sensitive to those increases in CO2. Of course, we are increasing CO2 at a much more rapid rate, 1 million times faster today. And if anything, what this study shows is that the climate may be more sensitive to this increase in carbon dioxide from human activity today. So he didn't understand what he was reading. He might have heard some talking points from conservative radio or television. And this is misinformation. Some would call it disinformation, intentional misinformation to mislead the public about what is arguably the greatest threat that we face.